Now, we've already had our first taste test of the all-new Mazda MX-5 earlier this year in Barcelona, but that was this base spec 1.5-litre car. Now, for the first time in the history of the world's most popular roadster, you have a choice. The MX-5 is due to arrive in Australian showrooms from August, first in the 1.5-litre specification and priced from just $31,990 plus on-road costs, a substantial 15k cheaper than the car it replaces, which in most recent years was available only with a folding metal hardtop roof. The 2-litre will land a few months later, just in time for summer, and while Mazda Australia has yet to confirm final pricing and specifications for the rest of the range, both the 1.5-litre and 2-litre are expected to be offered in 2 levels. Regular versions featuring cloth trim and a basic multimedia system, while GT variants will have leather, sat-nav and extra safety features like lane departure and blind spot warnings. 2-litre engine is anticipated to command a premium of between $3,000 and $4,000, with a 6-speed automatic available as an option on either engine for around $2,000 more. As a whole, the 4th generation has been designed to rekindle the spirit of the original Roadster, and at the moment features a fabric soft top as part of significant weight saving measures that sees the car tip the scales at just over 1,000 kilos. And as it's always been, the MX-5's roof operation is a fairly simple process. Simply unlatch it, flick it back and lock it in place. It's a one-handed operation. To get it back up is also just as easy. Unlock it, grab it, and there you go. Lock it back in place and you're off and running. The 1.5-litre engine is a variant of the same size motor first introduced into the Mazda 2 city car last year, but is mounted longitudinally and tuned specifically for the baby sports car, producing 96 kilowatts of power and 150 newton meters of torque, enough to propel it from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 8.3 seconds. Now, nothing has changed in terms of our impression of the MX-5 since we first drove it in this spec earlier this year. It is a cracking little car, and while the engine is smooth and refined and quite capable of loping along at cruising speeds in tall gears, it doesn't have a lot of low down punch, which means you have to row it through the 6-speed gearbox and work it hard to get the best performance from it. That, however, does make it charming and engaging to drive, just like its iconic forefather, and would have been perfectly suitable if Mazda had decided to stick with just one engine option. But the American market was a bit skeptical of just the small engine and demanded the bigger one remain, so let's see if it makes that much of a difference. Australia is only one of 2 countries in the world, the other being the UK, where you'll be able to choose between a 1.5 and a 2-litre engine in right-hand drive configuration. And it's actually going to be an interesting dilemma about which one you pick, because the basic 1.5-litre is an absolute sweetie, and you sort of argue against why you would need even more. But even just cruising around in this 2-litre version, you can feel it's got a little bit more torque and usability for everyday use. Firstly, the 2-litre isn't a new motor like the 1.5. Instead, it's an updated version of the previous model and generates the same 118 kilowatts, but has a slight increase in torque, up from 188 newton meters to 200 newton meters, which, combined with its lower weight, is good enough to reduce its ability to sprint to triple figures to just 7.3 seconds. Certainly from low revs, there's a bit more punch out of the box, but it is a bit raspier up top and it doesn't quite rev to the same degree. The red line on the 2-litre is only 6.5, whereas in the 1.5 it's 7,600, which gives you that little bit more engagement with the engine. There's not a lot of difference in the way that they steer or drive. The 2-litre only weighs 25 kilograms more, and it's really only when you're at the absolute limit that you can feel it across the front end of the car. Otherwise, both steer absolutely beautifully. When you're up it for the rent, you really can feel the extra grunt of the 2-litre engine, particularly from the mid-range, and it does have a sweeter exhaust note. Where the 1.5 is all about induction and squeezing more air into the engine, this you can actually hear the exhaust out the back. As for the way they ride, this generation of MX-5 is an absolute revelation. You can feel its lightness to the way that it's agile through the bends, but it really handles some pockmarked roads with quite a degree of poise. It still has that traditional MX-5 trait of rolling through the corners and leaning on its tyres, more so than the Toyota 86, which is really pointy and makes you laugh when you skid it around in oversteer. This one is actually a lot more balanced between the front and the rear. The other thing is just how engaged you are with your car. Like the steering, it is beautifully poised. The mechanical feel to the 6-speed gearbox, the feel from the brakes, and the overall balance of the car. It is really a fun car to drive at the limit, but also cruise around in as well. While the MX-5 is physically smaller than even the first generation drop top, its two-seater cabin doesn't feel all that much tighter. It's still a fairly confined environment, but the overall layout is much more modern, with a classy dash and the adoption of Mazda's latest infotainment system that brings it right up to date, with basic functions such as Bluetooth and sat-nav that weren't even fitted to its predecessor. The seats are tight and supportive, and the driving position is set nice and low, but the cockpit is not without its compromises, as it's light on storage for small items, there's no reach adjustment for the steering, and the cup holders require you to contort your arm to retrieve a drink. Well, now that you do have choice with the Mazda MX-5, is it an easy decision to make? Well, yes and no. The 1.5-litre base car is an absolute peach and will do 90% of the job for 90% of the people, 90% of the time. But for those driving enthusiasts that want that extra performance, you can't go past the 2-litre. It amplifies the MX-5's character to just that nth degree more.